Hello and welcome to All Out in the Open. This week we have an all-together episode where Liz and Michael interview people about how to build community in their sphere of influence. And they brought on two very exciting guests. They have Cynthia WinWard and Susan Hinckley, who are the hosts of the At Last She Said It podcast. These women are incredible. They're so good at building community, especially in kind of precarious religious spaces. And there's so much to learn from them. We really hope you enjoyed this episode.
Welcome to another episode of All Out in the Open.
Yes.
Here with Michael today, and we are so excited and lucky to have Susan and Cynthia from At Last She Said It here to join us. Thank you, ladies.
Yeah, thanks
Totally
for being
our
here.
pleasure.
Oh my
Pleasure
gosh.
indeed.
So, for those who live under a rock, as far as I'm concerned, and don't know about their podcast, it has been such a great thing for me to listen to, and I know so many of my friends and people who are like-minded who just love listening to them saying at last a lot of things that haven't been said or need to be said out loud. And they just came out with a book, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. We're going to talk about Michael and I's episodes focus on community building and bridge building. And so we're going to kind of tie all that together today. We're really excited for this discussion. I'm just going to read for a minute from the About the Authors from your book, and then we can let you tell us a little bit. So Susan Hinckley is a storyteller in words and pictures. A longtime exhibitor with the American Craft Council, her art is held in private collections across the United States. Wow. She writes and reflects on her faith and church experiences as a co-creator of At Last She Said It podcast. She'll travel any distance for good green chili or a glimpse of her grandkids, splitting her time between the Southwest and Midwest. Wow. Wherever she is, her heart roams the desert, preferably in a fast convertible. I love that. Cynthia WinWard makes her home in Provo, Utah, although she will always be a California girl. Before pouring all of her creative energy into At Last She Said It podcast, she was the owner of an online embroidery business. Her kitchen is her happy place, where she enjoys making the world's greatest red chili enchiladas.
Nice.
She prefers salty over sweet, TV over movies, and early mornings over late nights. She enjoys the good life as an empty nester with her husband, Paul. And I was just telling Eric last night, I have not gotten to have your enchiladas. So I have been to your beautiful home and kitchen, but
Soon.
one of these days that's going to happen. What would you like to tell us about yourselves?
Yes.
I know you love to talk about yourself, Susan.
What else would I say about myself? So, painter Georgia O'Keeffe
Yes.
once said, "I want real things, music that makes holes in the sky." And that has always been such a resonant image for me. And the older that I get, as I'm moving into the last portion of my life, I want real things.
Yeah.
And I haven't always insisted on real things in my life. And I certainly haven't always insisted in real things in my life as a Latter-day Saint woman.
Right.
And so there really came a point as I tipped over into older age where I thought, I don't have time anymore to not have real things.
Yeah.
And so that has changed everything for me. The At Last She Said It project, for one thing, grows out of that, out of the desire to have presence, actual presence in not only my own life, but in my church life, and to try to nudge our whole church into a space of greater presence, because I feel like we're good at a lot of things, right? We're good at truth. We're good at flexing our truth muscles. But as I've thought about it, truth is really sort of like this fake muscle suit that you put on.
Yeah.
But what's underneath it is sometimes I feel like missing in our church. And that is the real diversity of experience of church members. We don't have any emphasis on presence at all.
Yeah.
And that's where discipleship can happen. You can't have discipleship built around truth. It's built around presence. Yep. And so I just want us to be better than we are. It's great to stand up and say, I know this church is true, but is this church real? That's a better question, and that's more important to me the older I get. So I guess that's the thing I would tell about myself to give context to why we wrote the book, why we've done the project, and why I'm here.
Wow.
Well, that speaks volumes in a very short, concise way.
Yes, it does.
Thank you,
Wow.
Susan, for sharing that. Cynthia, what do you got?
Oh, the only thing I would add to that, and Susan kind of enveloped it in what she was saying too, is I love Latter-day Saint women, Mormon women, whatever we're calling ourselves. Like, I have loved this community, and I think Susan and I decided to start the podcast specifically to give voice, to give presence to women like us who have been in the pews our whole lives. And there is some overlap in mine and Susan's experiences, but there's also a lot of diversity between us. And I feel like we've kind of brought our strengths into this arena, into this space where we've tried to talk about the things that have been hard for us, but also that have been beautiful for us in this community. And it's been really interesting to see the community almost created itself. We kind of provided this space of, I'll go first, right? I'll go first and be vulnerable first and say the hard things out loud. Yeah. And then others, women and also men, have kind of said, oh yeah, me too. Yeah. So kind of like a church too for a me too, I feel like that's been the power of what we've tried to build, is just going first and saying the hard things first.
Love that.
Because when you started the podcast, I'm assuming, did you have an idea that you would have a Substack, that you would have lunch get-togethers, that you would have, let alone a book, or that you would go on to do multiple seasons and all?
We really just wanted to start a podcast. We didn't envision a whole community growing up around it.
Right.
But we got very lucky in that we stepped into a space that we didn't really realize existed, until we were in it. And there were thousands of women waiting in that space to join us in the conversation. So we just kind of happened into it by accident, I guess I would say.
Wow.
It has been a joy to watch and to listen and to see how women have responded. It really has. And I'm sure it can be overwhelming, I'm sure, because you didn't imagine some big project, and it's kind of turned into that.
Well, I think it speaks to the courage of going first, right? Of being willing to say the things that lots of people are thinking, but no one knows if you can say out loud.
Right. And you can have control over what you say, but you can't have control over what happens as a result of the things that you say, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And so we didn't really anticipate. We certainly never wanted to be anyone's spiritual advisors or even womanhood mentors or any of this. It's ludicrous when people ask us for advice. It's ridiculous. And yet I understand why people might make the assumption that we're more evolved in some way than we are, just because we were willing to, I guess, take that step of going first, right? And so, anyway, don't ask us. Don't ask us for. We are not the answer podcast. We are not the answer women. So
no, but you have great questions and you have great guests, and you do also have really good thoughts too. I appreciate the things that you sit and get to ask, and then. Not that you're having the answer, but you really have the discussions that are very relevant and very needed. In the title of your new book, excuse me, you mention honest conversations about faith, church, and everything in between. So tell us how that has created this community that you're seeing in your lives. Has it changed anything as far as community that you have for yourselves personally?
That's a good one, Liz.
You didn't think you were going into community here. Right. You didn't think you were creating that, but you clearly have. Yeah. That has been the fallout. And has that been something that you didn't know you needed, but you've enjoyed? Or
well, validation is just the best medicine in the whole world, right? Who doesn't love validation? Everyone loves it. So that's been really great. I had no idea. I've spent my whole life as a Latter-day Saint feeling like I didn't belong and didn't fit. Even
Really?
From atop my mountain of privilege, right?
Right.
I didn't feel like I belonged, and so finding out that actually I wasn't alone all of that time that I felt like I was has been comforting in a way. Also kind of sad in a way, but it continues to fuel my desire to help other people understand that actually none of us need to be alone in this church. So space making has become a mission that actually feels doable, like we actually can realize change in our church. And that's the first time that I've really started to feel that. So that's a huge difference for me.
That's really powerful.
And I feel like our space, I feel like when you read the title, Liz, faith, church, and everything in between.
Right.
I will only speak for myself, but as a lifelong Latter-day Saint, to me, for the first 40 years of my life, faith and church were the same thing.
Right.
Right.
And so I feel like Susan and I have tried to kind of come into this space and say, actually, they're separate. And there can be overlap, and it's actually fantastic when there is a lot of overlap.
Right.
But for so many of us who have felt like we didn't fit, either from the beginning or like me, I felt like I fit for 40 years, and then all of a sudden I didn't fit. I kind of had to start untangling faith and church, and they're both still very important in my life, but a lot of times there isn't a lot of intersection, which makes me sad. And those are a lot of the things that we talk about on the podcast. But I think that's one way Susan and I have tried to make space for women is they don't have to be the same thing, and maybe they can coexist together. For some people it's not safe for them to coexist together. That's not up to us. We never advocate. Susan and I like to say we don't work for the church.
Right.
I mean, we love the church, but we don't work for the church.
Right.
And so really we try to honor everyone's spiritual path, and maybe for them faith and church are the same thing. But I feel like anyone, if they're really going to be honest with themselves, the older you get, there can be a little bit of space between faith and church, just because life is hard and messy.
Yeah,
It is.
absolutely.
And the longer you're around, the more experiences and opportunities you have to realize that.
Yeah, well, and institutions, even probably especially global institutions and with millions of people that belong to them, can't fit perfectly for every single person
Right,
involved in
right.
it,
No,
right?
no.
So, yeah.
It's almost silly that I ever thought that's the way it could
Sure.
have
Right.
been until
Yeah.
it wasn't. And then I was like you said, oh yeah, they don't.
Yeah.
There was no way this was ever going to work for
Yeah,
everybody.
this is not a one
Right.
size fits all
Yeah.
for any human.
Yeah, for it to be real, right? You have to find your own way to it and your
Right.
own balance within it. Like, there are things that I think I've realized recently. I have had a long journey with the church, and I don't attend church right now because of the policy changes.
Right.
But in regard to those policy changes, someone in the church felt that because priesthood holders had told me that I could use the restroom in churches, that I should follow that. And then I had this weird moment of like, oh, but that's not my litmus test. And I had to realize that for that person, that was his litmus test of what is true in the
Right,
world. And for me,
right.
I was like, oh, we don't share that.
Yeah.
And that was a big moment where I was like, oh, we need to have a discussion
Wow.
about that. Because like, that is not how I judge truth. A priesthood holder can tell me what he thinks, and that's just his opinion in my world. For me, that's not justice or truth
Right.
or what is right to do.
Wow.
I was like, oh, we should sit down and talk.
That's an interesting moment that you described. I'm going to have to think more about that, actually.
Yeah, it was a big lightning bolt moment for me where I was like, whoa, okay. I think I just uncovered another layer in my faith journey.
Yeah.
Wow.
know?
That makes sense though.
Yeah.
So you both are explaining that you felt different in your faith community,
Right.
and but you probably weren't aware at some point in your younger years, like a lot of us, that everyone else was feeling the same kind of a thing. And then you've started this project that allows people, again, a bunch of women and some men who are all different, but also have some similar feelings and hopes and faith to come together and have a place, a community. So that kind of, it just overlaps onto what we usually talk about on here is there are so many different experiences as humans. God's diversity, the creation of the diversity of what we have here in humanity and on the earth is overwhelmingly stunning. And as we take that in, those differences to me are what make us beautiful. And then the bridges need to be built from there. But so I got to be interviewed. Was it on your first season?
Yes.
Was it the first season?
It might have
I love
been.
that.
Maybe second season at the most.
I
It was
can't
early
remember.
on.
It was a while ago.
Yeah,
I do
it was
remember it being
early.
a while ago. About having an LGBTQ child. And I don't even remember exactly. That was pretty much the gist of it. I think that was it. I don't remember if there was another thing that we were talking about, but and how I was navigating having an LGBTQ child. Since that episode, your daughter, Cynthia, is out. And how has that affected you and your husband in seeking community or feeling the desire to build bridges? I know some things you guys have done, but please share with us.
It's been, well, first of all, I want to nod to the fact that for so many of us who have LGBTQ kids, they come out to us often before they come out publicly.
Sure.
Right.
And that was really hard for me at first because I was so proud of my baby girl. I wanted to shout it from the rooftops. I mean, you know, I wanted to throw her a parade, but she's an introvert, so she wouldn't let me throw her a parade. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, and then just, you know, to hear sometimes things said at church and I could like raise my hand and try to make some more, put some more diversity out into the room, but I couldn't make it personal.
Right.
And for me, that's the only way I really know how to relate to people is to put myself in the room, and I couldn't, but I had to honor and respect my daughter's privacy for a while. I can't even remember now, how maybe a couple of years or something. And so that was hard, and I want to honor for so many parents. Like, I see you, I know what that feels like to just love every ounce of stuffing of your little baby, and you want to do all the things to support them publicly and talk about it, and often that is not the case. Sometimes never the case, but you know, for many of us, it takes a few years for our child to say, okay, mom and dad, you can talk about this. And so once she did come out, I just decided to start making comments in church, and I would preface it before my comment, and I would say something like, well, as an LGBTQ family, da-da-da-da-da.
I love that.
Because I just wanted people in the room to know there are all kinds of families in this church. A lot of times we think there is one kind, and we might call it the quote unquote ideal, but I wanted people to know this is the kind of family that we are. And so we might be looking at this with a different lens.
Right.
Yep.
And I mean, I never got any pushback. I mean, I'm sure people had things to say in their head, but I mean, to their credit, nobody has ever said anything out loud to me negatively about me openly talking about the kind of family that we are. And I remember a few years ago, I was a Sunday school teacher, and I was teaching the 12 and 13-year-olds, and our Christmas lesson was on the family proclamation. I have my own feelings about that, but I thought, okay, I'm going to talk about my family and the diversity that's in my family. So I talked about my husband and I, and maybe, you know, how we had met. I talked about my son and how he married a girl from a different country. And so, you know, that's another kind of family, right? And then I talked about my daughter and how she will marry a woman because that's who she's attracted to. And I just tried to say each one, like, these are all equal situations, but don't they look differently? And isn't that beautiful? And I said that to my Sunday school class. And then I said to my teaching partner, I said, I may get fired after this. So it's been a good run, you know, and nothing happened.
Yeah.
Nothing happened. And we just went on. And then, you know, January came, and then we started teaching whatever the next year's curriculum was. And so, yeah, I was really just trying to use my voice in any way possible, whether it's raising my hand in church or teaching 12-year-olds I wasn't teaching anything doctrinal in that moment. I was just saying, this is what my family looks like.
Right.
And we love them.
Yeah.
We love all of us.
Oh my gosh, that's so powerful. I can't imagine if in Sunday school I would have had the benefit of being taught by someone that said something so lovely and true and inclusive,
and simple.
and simple,
Simple.
and beautiful, and like just loving your family. And wow, what an amazing thing. The years of pain for so many of us, right? That could have like cut out of like, oh, it's okay to be who I am.
And it's even more powerful to me in that story that you're talking to kids.
Yeah.
Because you are positioning them for a whole different
Yes.
church experience than I had,
Yes.
Or than
hope
so.
so.
many adults in the church now.
But don't you think,
Wow.
don't you think that lesson I gave was more receptive to 12-year-olds than like 42-year-olds?
Well,
I mean,
yeah, that's the
I'm
funny
guessing
thing,
if
right?
I had taught that same lesson in Relief Society, I may not have had the same outcome.
Exactly.
It definitely depends on the
But I don't
group.
know.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
I don't know the answer.
Because, a lot of my Relief Society teaching has really focused on trying to get a clear picture of who the actual people in that room are and the diversity of experience in the room.
Yeah.
And I have found that women are so relieved, really, I guess would be the right word, and so receptive to that, so willing to step into that space with me, if I'm willing to open it. And yet, in a really memorable lesson, I think I talk about it in the book, where I asked women to lay out the hardest thing that they carried, whatever that was in there. And all kinds of things came out, like suicide, kid in jail, divorce, cancer, chronic unemployment. Every world problem was in that room with us.
Yeah.
And as all of those came out and the feeling in the room just like shifted and changed, the women in the room said that the thing that they had experienced the most in their church life was feeling judged. Wow. And I thought, how did we learn this way of being together, right?
Yeah.
And so I feel like when you lay out something like that, Cynthia, for kids, I mean, I think for adults, it's really valuable because they feel seen for the first time. Oh, maybe my family actually is just like every other family in this room, right?
Yeah.
They feel seen for the first time, but kids might then be in a position to go through their church lives without that judgment that I think we really must have imposed on ourselves.
We did,
in some way, right? We
Yeah.
imposed it on ourselves because we're all sitting there silently feeling it together.
Yeah.
Not necessarily feeling it toward other people, but toward ourselves.
Right. Well, I think that's like part of we talk together as friends a lot about patriarchy and the negative influence of patriarchal cultures. But I think that's one of them, right? And I think that's where like I have found so much kinship and support and love with women in the church, as a trans person, women, trans people, LGBT people. I think we all find a lot of kinship with one another. Yeah, because we have always felt judged, and like felt outside of something in some way. I think one of the questions that I have for you all is like, how do we help cisgender men in the church realize how we feel and the experience we have? How do we invite them into our experience so maybe they can see the ways that their experience actually does? They connect with us. They just have a lot of privilege and armor on that tries to make them feel they don't. But I'm sure they're feeling judged too, right? And maybe I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. Maybe they aren't. I don't know.
How do we get? This is the $1 million question.
Yeah,
I was just going to say, you're asking the question.
If we had the answer to that, our podcast would have been one episode long.
Next book.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. I'll read that one too.
That is a really hard question. And in my own experience, the only way I've been able to even attempt to try to fix that, get people to understand is one-on-one conversations. Yeah. I mean, I have a great bishop. He came to my home one night, sat down with me and my husband, and all he said to me was, "Tell me what it's like to be you."
Wow. That's powerful.
And for 90 minutes, I told him, and he hardly said a word for 90 minutes straight, what it was like to be a woman in the pews in the LDS church.
Yeah.
And he only gave me one bit of advice at the very end when he left. And it was very sweet, but he wasn't there to do that. And so if I could give one bit of advice to church leaders, it would be like, go to the people in your pews, to the trans people or to the queer people, the women, to the people who maybe have some disability. Go to any of them and just say, tell me what it's like to be you.
Yes.
And that was one of the most powerful moments I've had. And I think it can start there. I mean, and our good leaders in the church who are in the pews with us, they can't change policies. They can't change the rules. But there is a lot they can do at the grassroots level, I think, to help people feel more loved and welcomed. And but how will they know unless we tell them? And they're not always open. But when leaders are open, I'm showing up to say, here's what it is like.
I love
Well,
that.
that's ministering, right?
Yes,
It is. And we
it
talk
is.
about that a lot,
Oh, yeah.
but
Wait,
that
but do we
having
mean
someone-
it?
Having someone come, whether it's a leader or a friend or just another person in your congregation, and saying that's huge.
It is huge.
It is.
It's huge, and it's really simple. I don't think you have to have any special skills other than listening to go to someone and say, tell me what it's like to be you.
I guess you do have to not think you have the answers, right?
Yes.
That's
Humility.
true.
I don't know how
Yes.
you phrase that, but
No.
but when we walk around feeling like we know we have it all, we've got it all lined up, then that won't happen. But I think there's a lot of people who want to hear those things.
Yeah.
But
I
I
think
think it's
so.
a great suggestion to
It's brilliant.
do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like you said, it's easy, but also really difficult, I think.
It is very difficult. And as someone who loves to dish out advice, I mean, if you've been a parent, we're all experts at dishing out advice. Like, that's really hard to just listen to someone and not be like, oh, I can solve this
Yeah.
for you.
That's our
true.
instinct. I mean,
That's
that's our
always-
response, right? Like
Oh,
that just
absolutely.
comes, and then you're like, oh,
Right.
but I just listen.
Yeah.
That is something I've practiced, and I gotta do a lot more of the practice. But
It's a hard practice.
it certainly is how I strengthen relationships
Right.
when I can do that in a more listening way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a few years ago, you ladies came and did an event at in Mesa, and you invited me to share my experience of having an LGBTQ child to the women that were gathered. And it really seemed to hit the spot. I mean, the questions, there were so many questions. Everybody had a family member, and everybody,
Right.
and they weren't there for an LGBTQ event. They were there for, at last she said it, dealing with women's issues. Was it a surprise that so many women in that space were having, hoping to find a voice for their LGBTQ family members? Was that a surprise to you? I think we talked about it.
That
We were
was a
all kind of
moment.
like,
No.
Yeah, it was a moment because I don't remember if it was you that asked or if someone asked for women to raise their hands.
Who had?
Yeah. And it was
90%?
90% maybe
Wow.
Yeah.
of the
Whoa.
women who were there.
Well, one of the guests has become a good friend, and her mother, she had just returned from a mission. I don't know if you remember this, but
Yes.
yeah, and she was queer, and she's
Yes.
married now to her
Oh, really?
partner. And
Oh, I like
it's
knowing the
just
end of that story.
Beautiful. It's cute. A beautiful and supportive family, and really great. But she was like home, like not even
Yes.
a
A
month.
couple of weeks.
I
yeah.
remember that.
Yeah.
Whoa.
I remember that.
Yeah. I know. So just, it is interesting how all of these spaces intertwine.
Intersect.
And yeah.
Well, and I think what's interesting about that and that moment we had with you, Liz, because we had no idea. Our podcast was still pretty new.
Yeah.
Maybe
It
a
was early
year,
on.
18 months or something. And so we hadn't quite figured out how all of these mostly women had ended up becoming listeners of the Last She Said It podcast until we asked that question. And it was kind of and the question was just, how many of you have LGBTQ kiddos or really close family or something? And what was interesting as I thought about that question, I'm like, why would that have surprised us? I guess because so often when we're talking about tough churchy things, we sadly think this person brought it on themselves. They weren't reading their scriptures. They weren't going to the temple enough. They were sinning in some way. And it's like, here's a situation where it's like, these beautiful queer children of God are just born into families.
Yeah.
And LDS people have really big families, so the statistics go even higher, I'm sure, for having multiple LGBTQ children.
Yep.
And I just thought, is the church really aware that a huge factor in people going through faith transitions of some type is just who happens to be in their family? Nobody went, quote unquote, looking for trouble.
Right.
Nobody
Right.
went, quote unquote, reading anti-Mormon material. Like,
Right.
this is just who our families are. And sometimes I'm like, I don't know if our church leaders completely understand how so many of us end up in this difficult space sometimes in the church just because of the fact of who our families are.
Right.
Yeah.
And we do have large families
And we-
with
yep.
potential
Right.
for many
Yes.
opportunities to have LGBTQ beautiful people
Yeah.
in our lives.
Well, and our church does have more LGBT people per capita than other churches because of that. You know,
Sure.
it's just we
Makes
have
sense.
Bigger
It's
families.
math.
It's math. Yeah, it's just percentages and math.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Okay, I'm going to quote you from your book where it's toward the beginning you say, "We ask people to think about old ideas in new ways. That kind of stretching can be uncomfortable, but we call it holy discomfort." I love that. The willingness to consider diverse perspectives, even on the things we hold most dear, feels essential in an evolving world. We've learned that sometimes we have to be open to changing our minds, including how we think about ourselves. Faith is alive when it's growing, and growing means change. Tell us more about that. I love that.
That's so
That
good.
is Susan's beautiful words. So go ahead, Susan.
Oh dear, there's nothing worse than writing something down and then having someone
Say, tell me about
get
it.
back to you later. Yeah, that's great.
You can thank me later.
Except you love to talk about holy discomfort. So,
Yes.
I've spent so much of my life in discomfort. If I have figured out how to repurpose some of it into holy discomfort, then that's great. That's
Yeah.
a huge,
That's
a
a win.
huge step forward for me. That's growth.
Yeah.
So that's good. Change, the importance of change, actually, and this is what the next season of our podcast is going to be about. We're going to be tackling change.
Nice.
Has become increasingly important to me. I guess my own ability to navigate it, accept it, and embrace it, right? And the way that it intersects with hope in my life it's really, I would say, embracing change is really the work of my life now. I'm in my 60s now. It's not going to stop changing anytime soon. I kept hoping for about the first 50 years. I kept thinking, surely things are going to slow down here at some point, right? We're just going to be able to exhale and be done with all this. But no. But the thing about that is, once you embrace that and move into a space of welcoming change, it's actually an extremely hopeful thing, because in a situation like our church lives, it can feel like we're up against a brick wall that's never going to change. Whereas my personal experience tells me that everything is changing all the time, even within our church, right? And so it's actually a very hopeful space to move into. It was an anxious space for much of my life. It's no longer such an anxious space anymore. It's a hopeful space. And I'm hoping that that can also throw off light into the larger conversation about women's lives in our church and all the things that we're talking about. That if we can move into a place of expecting and welcoming change, then we're positioning ourselves for growth, collectively and individually.
Do you think, Susan, has that, I just love what you said at the beginning of like, you want things that are real now. And so has this process of like change becoming something that's kind of a core part of your life and not anxiety producing? been part of that?
Absolutely, because change is the realest thing that I
Absolutely.
can even think of.
Yes.
And it requires me to adapt, to be flexible and stretch and be open and willing in real time all the time.
Wow.
That's what's required of me to live well. I mean, that's what presence is, right? It's being open to change, sitting with it and being willing to move with it, you know, when we're asked to move. And so when we talk about like a living church, as Mormons are, you know, happy to talk about being a living church, if we're not willing to stretch and flex and grow and change and move in the direction that the world is taking us, right, in the context of our real experiences in this world right now in 2025, if we're not willing to get real about that and the change that it requires, we're not a living church anymore.
Yeah. Well, and we're not living the gospel then either,
We're
right?
not
If we're not making the
doing
gospel real
anything,
now.
right?
Yeah.
We're circling the wagons is not growth, right?
It's not, yeah.
It's not growth. And so I don't know. Yeah, change is becoming important to me. I'm a warrior for change now. So
It is uncomfortable. Like you said, holy discomfort. It's so uncomfortable, but also it is how we grow. It is how we move forward. And that is an important thing in our faith community, right? We talk about being able to become something, and that requires change. But again, we fight against it as humans,
Tooth and nail.
and also
Absolutely.
in our community
on a
specifically.
cellular level, I fight against it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because it seems like staying the same is so much safer.
So much better. We can all agree it's much better.
But
as a church heavily into proselytizing, right? I feel like that should be one of the messages we lead with, is that we are a living church and
Yes.
living things change.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
And instead, I haven't been a missionary, but I don't think that's, we can sit here and, well, what do I think of, what's the kind of the standard definition of a living church? And it's like, we have a living prophet. But I think it can be so much more, so much more than that. Because, Susan likes to say, if I'm not moving, I'm dead, you know? And so it's like, we have to be changing and moving forward.
Right.
Otherwise,
I wonder. Sorry.
You go
No.
ahead, Michael. I just think that we talk about an ongoing restoration, which is
Yes.
and our current prophet talks about that. President Nelson, past prophets have talked about it,
Right.
and I think it is. And I think we would all give at least lip service to it, right?
Absolutely.
But that does require change, and we, like we said, that is hard.
The key is in that word ongoing.
Yes, the ongoing.
Ongoing.
Well, I wonder what our church would actually look like for women if we truly embrace that as a church, of like an ongoing understanding of the incredible spiritual power and wisdom that women bring to our church. Because I feel like we have, this is just me speaking as an individual, but I feel like we don't, as a church and culture, embrace that. Like our definition is kind of still women in maybe the early 1900s,
Right.
not women today. These three amazing human beings in front of me in 2025, right? Like, what would our church look like if we did do that?
yeah.
Well, it makes me wonder, what will our church look like if we do that for LGBTQ members? Because
fair.
people's family relationships
Yeah.
are changing and evolving to include the realities that we are living with in 2025. When we know better,
Yes.
we do better, hopefully, right? So
Yeah.
people's families are changing, but the organization is lagging that change.
Absolutely.
But so I feel like ongoing is going to mean exactly that. We don't have the answers, and we are not there yet.
Yeah.
No,
And when we are finally there, we're done.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I think
we have a long way to go.
have a ways to
we
go.
got a ways to go.
We really do. Yeah.
Well, you brought up family, Susan, and you shared a couple things that really, I'm reading this because I love women and I want women to have the most and the best. But two of the things that stuck out to me the most, I'm not quite finished with it. Life has been a little wild. But the two of the things thus far that have stuck out to me the most were regarding parental relationships with their children, and then also a grandparent relationship. I'm not going to
Is it
get
your
emotional.
grandbaby?
I know. I'm a nightmare
Let me
with
know
this
if you need me to
grandbaby.
read it, because I'm practiced at not crying now.
So I just want to read this first quote from Susan and discuss it. And this is about a parent and a child. Of course, from their very first day, my children bore the fingerprints of hands much larger and more mysterious than mine own. Though they have turned out to be imperfect people, just like the rest of us, from the moment they arrived, I experienced them as a bright and perfect vision, a glimpse of God's great secret, teaching me in ways I've never been taught before. I could see clearly that the creative act brought me more personal connection with God, or something I could perceive as God, than any other approach I had tried. I first sensed the seeds of divinity in myself by seeing those seeds clearly in them. Ooh, there's so many levels to that just hits me of God and their divinity, our opportunity as women to be co-creators, and then that relationship with the fruits of that creation. And that then it goes back to, as we watch that and engage in that relationship with these children, that then it helps us to understand ourselves and the divinity in ourselves. That's beautifully written and phrased. But in this space, we have a lot who are listening who have kids who are LGBTQ.
Right.
And I have had that experience of knowing, and I know Cynthia has, the divinity and the beauty of my gay son, gay daughter. And so when I hear or I am told that they are less than, that they are okay as long as they don't be who they are, all of the different phrases and things that we do, it really doesn't work with that beautiful creative act and the divinity with which it shows me they have and that I have, and the love of God in all of that. Any thoughts on that in this specific space? I know you weren't writing to an LGBTQ mom, but that really hit me.
But in a way, I was, because I was writing to, my husband is fond of saying, I need a God who loves me at least as much as my own mother does. Right?
I love that.
I mean, that is so simple and so obvious. And yet, like, how did I miss it my whole life? How did I miss that God loved me almost my entire life in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? I missed that message.
Wow.
And so it was somehow in coming to understand how I felt about my own children, and that would be, my children, but in a way I'm writing to parents of any child. If that's the ultimate testifier to me of the nature of God. Now, there are a lot of people who aren't parents who are going to come to that in a different way than the way that I came to it.
Absolutely.
But that's how God taught me about it, right?
I love that.
If I can understand the relationship to my own child and all of the things that go along with that, then it teaches me about myself. And I don't know why I'm such a moron that I did not figure this out.
Well, I think you welcome all of us in with you.
Yes.
Welcome all the morons.
Because I started having children at 19, right? But I didn't experience it that way until I got older. I had to get to be a grandmother, really, before I started to understand what had been going on between me and my own children all of those years. Wow. So, and I think you have another quote maybe about that.
I do, actually.
Because you're in that club also.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on?
Well, it's
you
really
specifically
really interesting to hear. I hadn't thought about it that way, Liz, about you as a woman taking part in creation and then seeing the divinity in these children, these creation. Because as a mother who has never been pregnant, because my children are adopted, I have a different take on
definitely.
on
Please
that.
share.
Well,
And
I don't.
that is
I'm
lovely.
sitting here. My brain is reeling because I'm trying to think what exactly how would I spell that out? I'm going to have to maybe think more on
Okay,
that.
but can I ask you a follow-up question?
Okay.
Do you see the divinity in your own children in the same way that?
Oh, I absolutely
right,
do.
okay.
But for me, it has. I hadn't seen it as creation, more as I believe we learned to love people through service.
Yeah.
And for me, it was.
So it's in relationship.
It is in relation.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in
It's
relationship. And so for me, learning, and it wasn't learning, like, trust me, the instant I saw my babies, they were my babies. And, you know, I was feeding them and taking care of them. And, you know, 2:00, when you change a baby at 2:00 in the morning and feed them and sing them a lullaby, you're the parent,
You're the mama.
you know?
Yeah.
But also having created my family through adoption has actually meant so much to my gay daughter, because to her, family is family now. And so she has no qualms about however she and her partner will create their family someday, because she saw it modeled in her own home that a family is who you love, who you serve, who you spend your time with, who we all live who we make the relationship with.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful that for our family, because we are an LGBTQ family, and I guess you could say in the truest sense of the word queer, we are a queer family, because our family is a group of 5 people genetically all unrelated and yet completely family.
I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, what a nuanced thing that was told. And our youngest child is adopted.
That's right.
And I had those thoughts of, like, you know, I'd had 4 children, and when he joined our family, he wasn't a baby, so I didn't get the diaper changes. I mean, I actually did change his diaper because he was my nephew first, but it was an amazing experience to get to be his mom at the stage that he joined our family. And I think, another act of creation, maybe not physically, but he is part of our family.
Oh, yeah.
And all of that divinity that I see in the children I carried in a womb, I see that.
Absolutely. It's the same.
It
Yeah.
is.
Yeah,
Well, I
it's
think
the same.
at the core of creation, no matter how you create a family, it's a choice that you make.
Right. Absolutely.
Like I've always, like, family has never been, well, since I came out, family's never been about blood for me. It's been about the choice, choosing those
Choosing
people,
people.
every day to love them, and hopefully they choose to love me.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of the core of it all.
And there are many women who do not have the opportunity, either by choice or because of other circumstances.
Yeah.
But also those relationships can be so important in whatever way they create them in their lives.
Yes. Yeah. I'm all for expanding what we mean by creation.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like that's
Absolutely.
a good thing.
Yeah.
Well, we also create ourselves all the time, too,
Yes.
right? I mean, that's, like, as women in the
Good.
church, you're having to create yourselves in lots of different ways
Right.
That's
that are
good.
meaningful to you and your faith, and also meaningful to you and your families and your all
Love
of
that,
it, right?
love that.
I mean, we're all creating each other or creating ourselves and
Right.
helping each other do that.
And for those moms or dads who are listening, or siblings who are listening to this, and they have a newly out family member, I just hope you lean into that quote and just really spend some time looking for the divinity as you accept the change that's come into your life.
Yeah.
And give yourself grace, lots of grace, because we all stumble into this, imperfectly.
Yes.
But also be looking for that divinity in these beautiful family members that we have who are brave enough to come out to us.
Absolutely.
Okay, this other one, I know everybody's a grandparent, and I just am late to the party.
Right,
And
did you know it was so amazing? How
Well,
have
I
people
knew-
been doing this for so long?
I
and
knew
we
it
didn't
was
even
going to be
know?
great. I really didn't. I was under
Love
no
it.
illusions that it wouldn't be wonderful. I had no idea.
Right.
though.
Made this
Holy
wonderful.
It's
crap.
just
I
the
never
best.
wanted to be a parent, but I definitely want to be a grandparent. I would just like to, I want to skip. Just can I be
a
somebody's
solid plan,
grandparent? That'd be
I
great.
support this. I support this.
I think I'll be a great granddad.
You would. So this is the other quote that I was going to share. One day I was watching a 7-month-old grandson revel in the simple joy of being able to sit up. He picked up one toy at a time, bringing it clumsily to his mouth before trading it for another. He was doing nothing remarkable, just doing what babies do. But in that quiet moment, I was filled with a different kind of love for him than I'd felt for my own kids. I was so busy as a parent trying to care for and teach them, and feeling the weight of responsibility for every moment and aspect of their development and well-being. As moms, we can all understand that. This was a freer love without the same weight of responsibility. I had a flash of regret that sometimes I'd experienced my children's actions and choices as a reflection on me, and as a result of my own pride, struggled to respond with love and grace. As we rode the bumps to their adulthood, I grew to understand I loved them unconditionally no matter what they chose. But there was a love learning curve I could suddenly see didn't exist with my grandson at all. My love for him just is. It is not reliant on me, not reflective of me, not because of anything either one of us did or could do, but comes from some deeper place, larger than the myopic lens of self, through which I measure every parenting moment. I realized that a grandparent had probably once looked at me and felt the same wonder, a godly love. First of all, so beautifully written, but also I really do think that's what it is. That is how God loves us. We just are
I think so too.
valuable, lovable, beautiful. And in this space, in all spaces, everyone should be loved. But in this space, community matters and building bridges matter because of these amazing spirits that are in our families and who sometimes don't feel that love, feel like they need to do things, be things, say things that aren't reflective of who they are to be able to be okay and to fit in. And that just really hit me in thinking about talking to you guys. Do you have any thoughts on that one? I know you're a new grandmama too.
New grandmama as well. A friend once said to me years before I was even a parent, and I've never forgotten it, that being a grandparent is like being invited to someone's house for dinner and they say, we're having dessert first.
Yes.
So that totally makes sense, Michael, when you said, I just want to skip the dinner part. Skip the dinner part and go straight to the dessert part. Because, that's I have felt the same, too, about having my little grandson. Yeah, it's been wonderful. But I love that idea that Susan wrote about a learning curve.
Yeah.
Like, that's good stuff, my friend.
That's really
and
incredible.
Honest.
Our poor kids, right?
Yeah.
Well,
We try our hardest.
We try our hardest, but also our Latter-day Saint way of thinking makes it really hard, I think, to get our own ego, our own worthiness, all those things that we're trained that we need to be and do in order to earn God's love ourselves, right? In order to qualify for the atonement or for God's love or for whatever we're trying to qualify for. It really puts this extra layer on our parenting that really can get in the way. And that's why there was a learning curve for me. I did not come into parenthood knowing how to love my children in the way that God loved me. I just honestly didn't. I thought that it was a measure that what the choices that they made in their life were somehow going to be a measure of my obedience and my teaching and all of those things, like it was riding on me. And that was just like me getting in the way of being able to channel God's love and for them to feel God's love. I was in the way of that also, because there were all these layers between us in the parent-child relationship of my expectations and the things that, I really felt strongly that I had a responsibility to give them and instill in them. It was not a good setup.
Looking for outcomes and results.
Absolutely.
As opposed to
all outcomes.
the relationship.
Yeah. Well, and as a reflection of worthiness, right? Or living right.
Right.
And I mean, this articulates so beautifully something that I've heard from every parent that has that, including my own, that has had a child come out to them, right? Of like, they're like, what did I do wrong? Like that's the first, know. And it makes sense in our culture,
And that's owie,
though.
but it makes sense in our culture.
It totally makes sense in our
just
culture.
Does.
Yeah.
I wish it didn't.
I wish it didn't too, but to be able to ever have to I think you have to grapple with that as people living in the LDS culture, right? With all of this, you have to grapple with your feelings around that to be able to truly love your kids, especially if they're LGBT or they've left the church or, whatever the thing
whatever
is.
It is, whatever the thing is, it's going to be something.
Yeah. Wow.
But there's not a lot of grace or space really in our church provided for us to grapple
Right.
with that publicly, right? So
Right.
people are left trying to do that on their own in their families,
Yes.
trying to hide it from,
Yes.
everybody else because we don't want it to look like our family is somehow, different or not measuring up, or I didn't do the right things as a parent, or, whatever it is.
Yeah.
We're not set up to be able to process it successfully and incorporate that change collectively
Yeah.
either. So we have every strike against
do.
us in,
Well,
in this, I think.
And that gets back to what you were saying at the very beginning of that doesn't allow us to be present. It
Right.
doesn't allow us to be real
Yeah.
and actually creates a culture of performativity
Yeah.
instead of presence and realness with one another. And what a spiritual, I just can't, wow, this is just, I'm already a fan of y'all. Love your podcast, love your book. But I'm just really excited now thinking about what our church and our spiritual community could be.
Could be.
Yeah, if we did prioritize that realness,
Right.
that presence.
So these quotes and this discussion has really brought me to thinking that the community and the bridges that we are building often, most importantly, are in our own homes.
Yeah.
And it's great to do it outside of our homes because some people don't find that in their homes. So we
Right,
want to be there and we
absolutely.
want to have that for people.
Yeah.
But also, I think it should start at home. And it's not that it should, that's not the best word. It can start at home. And that is, if for me, boiling down my relationship with God, the Godhead, it's about relationship. And so then we get to model that here with the people that we've chosen as our families. And it's this great laboratory for learning.
Laboratory.
Yeah, how to love like God does. And we have these amazing spirits that we get to have amongst us. And we get to practice, sadly. Not always winning at our practice, but gosh, I just love the learning curve that you talked about. And then just them being valuable and loved because they just are. Just lovely. Do you have any other thoughts for an LDS, LGBTQ supporting audience? As we close?
Just as you're talking, Liz, I'm thinking about the two great commandments. Loving God, loving our neighbor, loving ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And how it really is all the same thing. I think sometimes we like to parse it out and be like, well, this means this and that means that. And I'm like, no, I think it's all the
related.
same work.
Yeah.
And so I just think in this space of queerness, of having LGBTQ family friends, loved ones, I think if that is our focus, we're going to be okay. And it's simple for a reason, right? Christ gave those two great commandments for a reason because, personally, he knew for me it would be enough to power my discipleship for my whole life because I'm such a clumsy disciple. I fail at it every day, but every day I can try again.
Yeah.
And so for those families who, maybe things have been tense, having a child come out or a niece come out, whatever, I just think, but that's all Christ asked us to do was love, 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 and we can always just keep trying again. And so personally for me, I know I'm going to spend my whole life trying to, I don't want to say the word perfection, but just to really become who my heavenly parents want me to become, which is like them, which is to love perfectly without any learning curve.
Yeah.
And that's just my goal now. As I've seen my own kids grow up and they're all in their 20s now, it's like now my job is, I say to them, we're fellow travelers.
Yeah.
We're fellow travelers now, and we just get to love each other.
I love that.
Love that.
Beautiful.
That's a great last thought. Thank you, Cynthia.
Yeah.
Do you have any more thoughts, Susan, as we finish out here? Do you have any other thoughts for this audience or?
I don't really know what I could possibly
Yeah.
add that would be better than that. I just feel like I thank you for choosing those quotes actually, because I'm not a parent of an LGBTQ child,
Right.
and yet I feel like it's really important for all of us to understand that the lessons are the same.
Yeah.
Like we're not asking people to do anything different
Oh, so
than
true.
to prioritize relationship, right? The lesson is in the relationship. Always. It's always going to be that
Always.
with
Yes.
God, in my opinion. It's
Yeah.
always going to come back to relationship. And so that's all that is required, is to love. That's really all it is. And the rest is details, right? It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the love is the thing. And that seems like something that everyone can understand.
You can understand it, and it sounds simple, but sometimes it's really hard.
It's so hard.
And that is the
that's
that
why
is the
that's
work,
why it's
right?
like 2 rules. That's why we have the commandment reduced to this, because it's really, really hard, right?
I think
Not
it's a
trying to
lifetime
say it's
goal,
easy,
right?
but I think God stands ready to teach us those lessons, right? However they're going to come to us, God is ready to teach us those lessons. We just have to be ready to, willing to receive them and to experience them. So.
Wow. That's so true. Oh my
Such
gosh.
a great conversation.
I just want to talk to you 2 all day. Like
know.
all 3 of you. Just want to hang out all day.
We really appreciate you coming and joining us, and we get their book. It's fabulous.
Yes.
And can't
And
wait for the
listen to the
new
podcast.
season to come out. Yeah.
Yes.
And we just thank you for joining us on another
Thank
episode
you.
of
Thank
All
you.
Out
Thank
in
you
the
so
Open.
much.